Here we go. Resumed. Good morning. Crying emojis. This is the last one of 12. Sad face, sad face, sad face. Now, you will have access to the playlist forever, largely because I can't figure out how to delete a playlist if I wanted to. And my ego is very much appreciating that I can actually quantitatively see how many people are clicking on the videos. I'm saying that because it implies that you are watching the video. I'm going to encourage you, if you're watching the video or you go back and use them as a tool later, please leave comments because I only have monthly therapy appointments. So that's super nice to hear, like, oh, I liked this point or I learned this thing. And if the comment is awful, I just delete it because it's my YouTube page and welcome to America, right? If you're interested, there's somebody who wrote a book that is Why Social Justice is the Devil. That comment keeps showing up. And if you'd like, you can text me and I'll send you the name of the book. Okay, so it's the last one. People can still register until the end of business today, which is February 16th. If anyone is interested, that way they'll have access to the playlist. Am I going to police or monitor who has access to this playlist? No, I don't even know how to do that. Share it, enjoy it, get it out there. I think it is particularly humorous when my speaking colleagues, some of which are on the call, I almost said the phone, and they super micromanage who has access to their content. I don't know, go for a dog walk. It seems like you could use your time and energy for something else. I am trying to build a better universe. And if someone snarfing on a playlist that they didn't register for does that, sounds good to me. Please share it out as widely as you would like. I know, 143 views. Isn't that amazing? Okay, so today we are going to be doing working across difference, making better connections. That's like the big plan for today. So let me give Pat deputy duties because I forgot. Thanks, Pat. And let me tell you a little bit about this workshop before we get going. So I used to have the last workshop called Becoming a Better Ally. And what I liked about that title was that it implies that you're capable of already being an ally, but like, how can you become a more conscious ally? I like that a lot. Then the word ally got somehow politicized. And so I still technically offer this program under that title because sometimes people don't want a program that doesn't have the word ally in it. But more often than not now, when the word ally is in the title, it freaks people out. So I came up with a new title. I didn't know what else to do. So working across difference is your ally, like Becoming a Better Ally program, but don't tell anyone because that could be offensive. If you have any questions, thoughts, comments now or later, you're welcome to text message me at 202-670-4262. Thank you, admin assistant Emily. Wow, my dog just did something and knocked a whole bunch of junk off my desk. Thanks, old guy. Okay, don't forget to follow me on the Instagrammies. And if you are watching any of these videos, please leave affirming comments because they make me feel good. And I didn't know that I could even read them because I don't have a lot of YouTube followers, but I could now. See that? All right. So working across difference is what we're going to be talking about today. And I call this kind of the like wrap program. So if I were to do a webinar series, usually it is starting place, unconscious bias, some kind of wild card, and then this is kind of the tie it all together kind of thing. Emily says, I now remember this number better than the people on my speed dial list. That's funny. But I could be on your speed dial list too. Feel free. All right, so here we go. Is anyone familiar with the moon? It's a big question to get started off with. Is anyone familiar that a moon exists? You would never know, or at least I never know, what is actually considered today's controversial question. So I'm starting there. Yes to the moon. Okay, good job, Rob. So what I think is interesting about diversity, social justice, self-reflection, responsibility work is there is something in us, me, I'm including me in that us, there is something in us that thinks this work starts at A and ends at like Z, And all we have to do is the exact perfect things in between A and V. And then bam, we are solved. We will never be offensive again. We have no chance of ever being canceled. We will not cancel other people. However, we will defend what is right. I have no idea what people are talking about because that is crazy talk. That's not how this is set up. So I want us to use the moon as a metaphor. The reason why is that if the moon and the moon phases were to stop because the moon was finished, that would actually be a real problem for like how the universe technically is understood. Can we agree on that? Is that controversial? So if the moon phases keep on a going, we're not going to get into why that's the case because I was a ceramics major, but it has something to do with shadows, locations, and rotations. Let's just go there. I want us to think about the moon phases as this kind of ongoing perpetual journey because this isn't a linear destination. I don't know that the moon is made of cheese, but that would be great if it was. So as we have now gotten through 11 different webinars, we're going to start first with the truth, whatever that may mean. What I think is interesting about truth is that it's yours. So I want you to just sit. You don't have to take notes. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I just want you to talk to yourself about your familiarity with your truth. So if I said, what is your racial identity? Can you answer that question? And how familiar are you with answering that question? Spoiler alert, those of us that have visible, marginalized, or silenced racial identities, or at least appearances that are perceived by others, you're probably very familiar with that because you're constantly having to navigate other people perceiving that racial identity. As a white person, it was like 2004 before I was ever conscious that white was even a racial category because I thought racial categories were these other things. So until then, I absolutely was not familiar with my racial identity because I didn't even know that counted. Now I am much more familiar because I choose to be. Okay, so we're starting at your truth. You don't have to tell anybody. You don't have to write it down. No more of those 4 quadrant things. Just how familiar are you with your truth related to whatever your racial identity is? Next, we talked a little bit about this at the beginning of this call. It was as others. What is your cultural or ethnic identity, if you have one? And are you familiar with it? Are you not familiar with it? When we were talking yesterday about, now I forgot the name of the book again, After a Long Silence, we are talking about these cookies that when the author of the memoir traced the history of these cookies back, it ended up in a cultural or ethnic identity that she wasn't prepared for. She didn't know about that. So your truth, how familiar are you with any cultural nuances or your own cultural experiences, your own ethnic experiences, and how they are or are not possibly in line with your racial identity from the previous question? What is your economic or class identity? This one is always particularly interesting because are you thinking of what it was as a child? Or are you thinking of what it is now as an adult? Is it the same or is it different? Because we tend to rank economic class, are you more, quote, well off now? Or are you less well off now than you were? What happened? I know for me, I was raised very upper middle class, upper class probably. We called ourselves middle class and we were upper class enough that I knew my friends were richer than me, but I didn't necessarily understand that we weren't poor because I wasn't surrounded by people who had less resources than me, right? Like we only had a 1-car garage, and one of my closest friends in middle school had a helicopter pad. So then how familiar I was with what economic class was didn't really come into the fore for me until I started filling out financial aid forms to get into college after my parents died, when I came back from the Peace Corps and I hadn't made a real income for a couple of years, supporting myself through graduate school. And then I think now, compared to that to now, where I am today, I'm much more familiar with my economic and class status, largely because I'm self-employed. Was it a good month or not a good month? How am I doing overall? Do I want to ask that question? Again, how familiar are you with your current economic or class status or identity? Okay, gender identity. Some of us never think about this. Some of us have to think about it all the time. What is your gender identity and how familiar are you with it? What is your current ability? You know, all of our ability is very temporary, and most of us are going to be out of control of when it no longer exists. How familiar are you with having to struggle to access things? Are you not familiar at all because you haven't really ever struggled in that particular area? What is your current ability or disability access? What's your current age? I literally mean today, like what number are you? But I want to then ask you, if you didn't know the day you were born, would you be young or old today? If you didn't know the date or the year that you were born, would you consider yourself aging or just hitting your stride, just going through puberty? If you didn't have that numeric value, how familiar are you with your current age this life? Just think about that. What is your religious identity and how familiar are you with it? If you don't have a religious identity, how familiar are you with flexing the I do not have a religious identity? Are there religious practices that you still practice, even if you don't actually have a religious practice or a faith that you follow? Yesterday's conversation about Christmas, I think, is a great example of this. I know a lot of non-practicing Christians who love Christmas. And I also know a lot of practicing Christians who don't do the consumer part of Christmas, but do the other pieces of Christmas, especially now as we just passed Ash Wednesday and we're coming into Easter and things like this. Those kind of cultural religious traditions are much more familiar, usually tied to family traditions, ethnicity, or culture. What is a political belief system that you hold? Has it changed? Has it evolved? I think that at least within the US political context, there's some splintering that is happening within what we consider the two main parties. I know as a self-identified pinko commie liberal who is obsessed with politics, so far, every name that has possibly been mentioned as a possible candidate is still way too conservative for me. And I think, why not? Let's just burn it down and go like super left progressive and freak everyone out. What do we have to lose? It's already like practically Armageddon, but no one agrees with me. So great. We'll stick with Melba Toast. Wonderful. What is something about you that you don't share with everyone? This is a particularly interesting question in that you might be familiar with something that you don't share with everyone. You might be unfamiliar with something that you don't share with everyone, but whatever it is that's about you is still part of your truth. The very first webinar, we started with what is your definition of responsibility and what is your definition of agency? Whatever it is correct for you. Not in a moral relativist kind of way, but that's really your truth. That's the starting place. And so I ask, are there things about yourself that you don't share openly? Some of us, me definitely included, I used to overshare because it was a defense mechanism. Because if I could scare the cupola out of you, you wouldn't ask me any follow-up questions. And so I picked a couple of very scary, terrifying, controversial things and led with those as an icebreaker. And that is how I created a life habit of not having close friends. So now I'm less porcupiney because I actually would like to have some friends. But now there are things I'm very familiar with that I don't often share with other people because I've learned that's a lot for them, right? So now that stuff kind of just trickles out. Or I will make the mistake and just assume my friends have like downloaded my life history, which is not necessarily true. How familiar are you with the things that you do share? How familiar are you just with your truth and what you're grappling with or what you're questioning about yourself, what you're arguing with yourself about, what you're hiding, what you're compartmentalizing, what you don't want to think about, and what's at the tip of your nose, even if you're trying not to think about it. If we can pay attention to that truth for ourselves, it's a lot easier to then kind of hold space for acknowledging that other people may have different truths. Again, not moral relativism, but being able to acknowledge or recognize that there are things and people and cultures and traditions and actions and belief systems that are different than my own. When I do an IDI assessment, often as a consultant, and this intercultural development index tracks how you think you are working across differences, but then it also tracks how other people actually interact with you across difference. And so then it creates this gap of one's self-perceptions and how someone else might actually interact with you across those differences. When you can acknowledge differences, can you acknowledge them without judgment? Or do you acknowledge the differences and then dismiss them and try to minimize them so that you can kind of find all commonalities? That undervalues those differences. Can you hold commonalities and differences together without judgment as acceptance? Can you adapt across all these differences while also questioning or holding judgment from others, but to yourself? And can you integrate that all together? Spoiler alert, less than 3% of the population can actually adapt or integrate difference without judgment. Most people are in minimization because it's less confrontational. So if we were to look at differences and use this moon metaphor, I want us to understand that we are very capable of seeing very different things and being completely fine with those differences. We are also very capable of being very wigged out by differences because we don't know what we don't know. And then all of a sudden it has become apparent. Some of y'all are still bothered that I did not tell you what color socks I was wearing yesterday. Not going to tell you, but I will tell you today I am wearing socks. You're welcome. We don't know what we don't know. We could actually be conscious of what we don't know, some of it at least, and we could be conscious of what we do know. It's the knowing, the act of knowing, that is this kind of moon process. We talked a lot about this yesterday, is you know what you know what you don't know, and then there's everything else, the ever expanding galaxy of options. So now that you have survived this series, it seems that the frequent flyers, those of you that would get a pin that doesn't exist, of coming live to as many of the webinars as possible, at least attended 10. It seems that people missed at least 2. If you missed less than 2, let me know and I will give you a fictitious ribbon. But what I want you to do is to sit in yourself and have a conversation about who are you? What are you doing? Are there bits and pieces of you that you would like to do differently? Are there bits and pieces of you that are incongruent? Or are there bits and pieces of you that you now have reflected on? It has survived your own questioning process, and you're going to believe in it and be that way and act that way even more because it has survived your own questioning process. That's your work to do. I can't make you do anything. I can't turn you into anything because I am way too busy trying to figure out what's going on over here. Whew, right? Y'all lucky. You only have to deal with yourselves. Nobody out there's got to fix me. You're welcome. I'll do that heavy lifting. So let's think about what those stages could be if we were actually going to hold ourselves responsible for when we decide to or we decide not to be able to be ourselves and our best selves when working across difference. So we mentioned the golden rule 100 webinars ago, and then I introduced the platinum rule. Remember the golden rules when we all talk like pirates, we treat others the way I want to be treated? Well, that would be nice. But a platinum rule is actually treating the person the way they want to be treated. So I like to use this example to remember the platinum rule. So Ava and I are friends in real life. So I'm going to say, hey, Ava, guess what? On November 8th, I'm going to be in Omaha and I made reservations at our favorite pizza place, and I already pre-ordered our pizza because my favorite pizza topping is green olives. I can't wait to have lunch with you. That's how the golden rule works, right? Is that I don't even know if Ava's going to be in Omaha on November 8th or whatever date I said. I have no idea if there's a pizza place there, and likely there is. If there is a pizza place there, it is likely not to have green olives as a topping because y'all don't know what's good, and it is not considered a popular pizza topping, right? Now, Ava is the kind of friend, she'd figure out how to get to Omaha. She'd figure it out. But the platinum rule would be asking like, hey, Ava, do you want to go to lunch? If you do want to go to lunch, would you like to go to this pizza place in Omaha on November 8th? If you would, do you share a pizza or are you like a personal pan pizza kind of place? Right? Like that's the platinum rule, is finding out what the other person wants or not. We are not getting plain cheese pizza, Ava. That's not happening. No, I will bring my own green olives. Back off. Okay, so I'm going to invite us to think about what it would mean if we were responsible for ourselves from a place of the platinum rule, right? So we're going to treat people as best as we can from how they want to be treated. Now, remember my motto, do the best you can with what you've got some of the time. Can you do this 100% of the time? No, because we are jerks. We are self-absorbed narcissists. Yeah, we're real good at that. So let's use those skills and then pay attention to when we can and when we can't actually be responsible for ourselves. So if the platinum rule is a different perspective, I want us to come out of ourselves and look out at the other people, look out at difference, and notice when we can and when we cannot bring our best selves or bring all of our skill sets into a situation. When we decide to make a better connection with someone else, what this means is that we are not trying to win or be right. Some of you are already out. Like, nope, I'm out. I like to win. I like to be right. For being really honest, we like to make other people lose or other people wrong often way better. To make a better connection means that you're going to suspend that as your goal and you're actually going to try to just elevate humanity. It's a small ask, but I'm going to show you how to do this. And I want you to pay attention to when you are hard out and you don't want to do it anymore. So the first thing is you're going to decide, I want to make a better connection. Well, that sounds easy enough. But what I really mean is that in this particular interaction, you're going to be conscious of when you want to stop making a better connection and when you don't want to stop making a better connection. You're not going to try and win. You're not going to try and make them lose. You're just going to try to elevate humanity in this particular interaction. I should mention you are not entitled a conversation partner. This is much harder than it seems, but you get to have a conversation with yourself of when you do and do not want to do this, and when you do or do not change your mind. So step one, I am going to make a better connection. Great. Step two is understanding the constraints of the particular interaction. Is it a phone call, a text, an email? Is it in person? I'm going to say, because you should practice this usually with people you're not going to see again because you're going to screw it up and they'll hold you accountable. And you certainly do not want to do it with a coworker or a friend because they're definitely going to hold you accountable. So kind of like a good personal trainer, you need to know when the appointment is over, right? So that when Zach says, give me 10 more, if you slow down and are looking at the clock, you could run out of time before you get to 10. Pro tip. So you need to be able to determine when are you done having this intentional conversation where you're going to elevate humanity, and then you get to go back to being a jerk. So let's make a setting of you're going to talk to a barista in an airport. So you have the window of time from engagement until, let's say, the cup is in your hand. And as soon as you are holding that beverage, you don't have to elevate nothing anymore. But now you can pay attention to what happens in between engagement and when you get to clock out. Make sense? So intentional conversation. Next step, this is where I'm going to lose most of you, is you're going to listen to that person as if they're wise. There are definitely some people in my life where I don't want to do this because have you met Todd? He's not wise. I can't do this. What I mean by this is that the person that you're about to engage with knows something that you don't know. And can you engage with them? Can you listen to them as if you don't know an answer? So a great example with this when we're talking about customer service is if the person in front of you is really rude to the cashier. I often get to the cashier and then tell the person, like, if you need to take a second and breathe, you are technically following the directions of a customer. That was really rude. I have all the time in the day. How you doing? Right? Like checking in and being human with them. As a super extrovert, I'm kind of using sonar like a dolphin. So I might crack a joke or something and see how that information comes back to me. And then I get to use my judgments and assumptions to determine how they're doing. Luckily, we make judgments and assumptions all the time because it helps us feel safe and prepared. So you're going to write a story about the other person, and then you're going to use that information to try to actually figure out how to form your message. Even the bad guys will be able to help you do this. So once you slow down enough and you can take those judgments and assumptions with you, then you can decide what you are trying to say and how you are trying to say what you're trying to say because you are clear on what it is you're trying to mean in this message. So if we're at a barista, I'm probably trying to order an oat chai. That is probably like the outcome. But in a better connection, I'm going to try to end up with an oat chai and also possibly maybe make a smile. I really, really like making people laugh. And so I might try and make this person laugh, which sometimes they see that coming. And so they're not going to laugh. And now it's a game. It's a staticky game. I love this game. I will win. Sometimes I don't win. But can I form the message of what I'm trying to say while I'm really clear on what I'm trying to say? So the metaphor I say about these two is often Swiss rolling. Some of you may need to know about the Little Debbie Swiss roll. It's an obesity starter kit. Highly recommend. But it is fake cake smeared with caulking, rolled very tightly together, dipped in fake chocolate, which is why you have to eat them frozen. You don't want to separate those key ingredients because no one wants to know what's inside of a Swiss roll. So similar to being responsible for the meaning and forming the message, you're going to Swiss roll it together in an inseparable way. It doesn't matter which one is more important because you wouldn't eat either of them by themselves, right? But when you are super, super, super clear of what you are trying to say, and you have made solid decisions about how you are trying to say what you are trying to say, you can be, if I didn't lose you at listen to others as if they're wise, I'll lose you now. But if you can Swiss roll whatever it is you're trying to say with the goal of elevating humanity, not winning, then you are capable of being 100% responsible for whatever it is you're about to say. Now, some people are in marriage therapy, and so you want to be like 100% responsible. We're only 50% responsible. That's how marriage therapists have job security. I'm not a marriage therapist. I'm going to ask you occasionally, every once in a while, can you practice being 100% responsible for whatever you're about to say or whatever you're about to do, regardless of what happens? Because you are responsible for the impact of whatever you end up saying or doing or not saying or not doing. And if you're 100% responsible, you're far more likely to be less defensive. Now, what defensive often looks like, there's two versions typically that show up. One is what I call the turkey, and one is called the court reporter. The turkey is when somebody says something to you, and your response is, you kind of rock back on your heels and you make that noise usually like, what that means is that someone has told you what a meaning they have taken from what you have said or done or not said or not done. And that is not what you meant. You don't know what you meant, but it wasn't that. So you tend to get really defensive, but you weren't 100% prepared for what you meant in the first place. Hence the turkey. The court reporter is a conversation that you know didn't go very well, and you have printed out the transcript of that conversation. Their lines stay exactly the same, and your lines get better and better and better in the court reporter. For me, this shows up between the first and the second conditioning cycle, and usually it's related to Brian Baxter, who in 8th grade, let me take you back, it's 1987. I had just discovered purple glitter eyeliner. I had a spiral perm and a 24-hour headgear. I'm telling you, it does actually get better. But Brian Baxter had the audacity to break up with me in front of our entire science class. I was humiliated, probably still am humiliated, and I review this transcript quite often, largely because the reason why I was so humiliated in 1987 was because I didn't know we were dating, let alone now being broken up with. Now, these commitment issues have moved forward in all of my relationships. I'm working on that. But the ability to like eviscerate 1987 Brian Baxter is a fun entertainment for me. And at the moment, I was not 100% responsible for what was going on because I didn't even understand what was going on. And part of that free falling experience is why that moment in time is like frozen and constantly brought up in my frontal lobe. Can you, in this instance, we've made up an example at a barista, can you have the goal of elevating humanity, and before you really engage with that person in humanity, can you actually be 100% responsible for the message that you send out to that person so that no matter what happens out there, you are responsible for it? You're less defensive. There's no need for a court reporter. If you can do that, at that point, and only at that point, can you then make meaning of this particular interaction or conversation. Now we're back to judgments and assumptions. We're super good at those. So if we can make judgments and assumptions about how do we think that went, the person that you're practicing with, are they better for the engagement, neutral, or worse? The bonus of judgments and assumptions is they're not actually based on accuracy or fact, because they really make us feel safe and prepared. So maybe we feel like this interaction got worse. All right, well, what can we learn from that? Maybe we feel like this interaction was pretty neutral. Okay, great. That can happen. Maybe we actually think that this is way better, right? Like the energy shifted and like everything is wonderful and perfect. Can't know. And often we're not even actually checking in to see if we're correct, but we can kind of assess in the moment, reflect back on ourselves, probably be a little bit more aware of when we wanted to get off, like take an exit ramp of this little flow chart, and when did we actually feel comfortable about staying in on it. Then we can process the meaning of our connection. Did this elevate humanity in the given moment? Did it not? Are we blaming them for that? Or are we applying the platinum rule and actually trying to figure out how we could involve them the way they want to be involved? Did we feel entitled to an outcome? Because we can get over that. We're not entitled to an outcome. If we can do that, then like the process or the phases of a moon, we're going to continue practicing this process over and over and over and over and over and over again. And spoiler alert, it does sometimes get easier and then it doesn't. And somehow it's harder again. But what does get better is your ability to notice how you're showing up, what your patterns are, what you feel responsible for, and what you're using your agency for. So I'm going to put a handout in the chat, but before I do that / multitasking, because it takes a second to click on the things, y'all know how this works. I want to open it up and see if there are thoughts or comments or anything that I can help with. as we kind of went through that flow chart. What's coming up for you? How are you doing out there? Here is the handout. I did get a text. This part of the talk really has reminded me about this book called Nonviolent Communication, part where we treat people as their wives. First off, it's a great book, and I use a lot of nonviolent communication standards or steps in Good Enough Now book, which is all about doing the self-work. Yes, so I highly recommend that. So download the handout. I recommend that you keep it close by, keep it by your computer, keep it by your phone, keep a copy in your car. I do not recommend handing a copy to a barista. That's odd. Because you're responsible for your own work. They're not necessarily down for homework. But if you can start paying attention to how your strengths and weaknesses ebb and flow, and how you use them or choose not to use them, how it connects with your sense of responsibility, then you are actually in the process of doing the work. Thoughts, comments, again, more text you're welcome to send to 202-670-4262. I know we're about halfway through the time, and I want to make sure that you get the handout and see if there are any other thoughts, comments, or anything like that. This is a great springboard jumping off point. Great. Thanks, Denise. Pat, thank you for putting the texting number in. Usually I get questions about Todd or Barb in accounting and how annoying they are. So just in case any of those are kind of percolating or bubbling up, I just want us to notice that we often put the reasons why we can't do something onto someone else while you're having a conversation about your own sense of responsibility and your own sense of agency. So you are capable of recalling someone else, but not in that context. When we switch from golden rule to platinum rule, you can use that skill. And you can actually ask Ava if Ava wants to go to lunch with me, and if she's in the mood for pizza, and if she's a personal pan pizza kind of person, or does she want to share a pizza? And if we're going to share a pizza, I would recommend figuring out how are you going to split leftovers. That conversation needs to happen prior to sharing a pizza. Unless you're eating a pizza with me, there will be no leftovers. So that doesn't have to be a discussion. I completely agree. I am 100% always in the mood for a pizza. I actually have, there's a place locally, while y'all are thinking of questions, I will tell you a story about Babes. Babes has calzones. And for some reason during COVID, they no longer made calzones. I do not know. No one knows the connection between a global pandemic and an inability to make a pizza folded in half. But they did not make calzones. But it was very exciting when they started making calzones again. And they are big, big calzones. And I always order one. And I always, always, always say, I'm going to eat half of this for dinner so that I can have the other half of the calzone tomorrow for lunch. And that has never occurred. I don't know. Have any of you ever successfully eaten half a calzone? Anyone? Folding the pizza in half traps germs? I don't believe you. I think it was a marketing ploy because they're the only place you can get calzones locally. And the day they announced that they're making calzones, back in business. I think it was a marketing ploy. I do not believe germs had anything to do with it because I live in rural California. We don't care about germs. Questions, comments, further conversations about my calzone problem? Well, I'm not seeing any text. I'm not seeing any questions, and no one's coming off mute. So hopefully you got the handout out of chat. If you have a copy of my book, it is page 192. Because this is so popular, even in the new book that I am writing, it still involves these particular steps. And because I am a triple Virgo, I am trying to make this chart be page 192 in a book that doesn't exist yet, because that's the kind of detail that I pay attention to that means nothing to anyone else. You're welcome. I have a therapist. Okay, so I will start this part and then maybe we'll see if we have some questions. I've been answering a lot of questions about the book club, so maybe people will be able to ask questions here about it. So there's two different ways of doing the book club. One of them is each individual person who is registered for this can sign up and we will figure out a doodle time and we will go through the book together. Usually that's 4 or 5 1-hour Zooms over a period of time. The book nicely divides into 4 sections. Most people don't do the last section all at once, so I end up splitting it in half. So I just upfront schedule 5 sessions. It comes with a free book. You're welcome to do this. Sounds great. It's $47. We'll be talking about the discussion questions that are at the back of the book and not your actual sharing of what came out of all the different individual activities where you are discovering who and how you got to be how you are. Some people think, wow, this is a really good professional development internal team shebango we should do. Or perhaps you have your own lesbian book club. I don't know. So if you do have your own kind of book club and you want me to come to a pre-existing group, I'm happy to do that. Up to like 10 people. Everyone also gets a free book. I am a cutthroat, super aggressive salesperson. So if you need more time, or that was a joke, no one laughed. But I am not a very aggressive salesperson. Having a PowerPoint slide is a little icky feeling for me. But if you are interested in me coming in and doing something internally, not eternally, internally, spelling matters. Internally in your organization, I've been answering some questions over email about this. If it's less than 10, sounds great. If it's more than 10, how much more than 10? We'll figure it out. So just let me know if you are interested in this group doing a book club and or if you are interested in me doing a pre-existing internal group book club. Again, 4 or 5 1-hour sessions. Questions, comments, thoughts, anything about the book club? Again, the texting number is 202-670-4262. I'm not seeing any questions about the book club. Feel free to email or something. We can keep the conversations going. And then I primarily am a keynoter, so I want to make sure that you know about this piece. It is interesting to me when I do a number of virtual programs, I inevitably will get a call or an email, and it will say something to the effect of, do you think you could come and do this in person? Yes, that is actually what I prefer to do. This is what I do when I don't really want to wear nice pants, right? Are y'all familiar with the concept of hard pants? Ugh, hard pants. Anyway, so when I don't have to wear hard pants, I do virtual stuff. So if you are interested in me coming and doing something in person, you are welcome to schedule a time with me. This very sexy QR code that I made all by myself with Pat's guidance in my branding colors. Did that part by myself. Thank you. Thank you very much. You can schedule an appointment. You get 10 free books for an in-person keynote. Kendra, the slide is coming back up. I see your thing. That dress doesn't look too hard. That dress? No, that dress is a polka dotted tent because I'm not dumb and it has pockets. Great. We are doing this entire webinar series for Crazy Horse Memorial. So it is one of my favorite places in the whole wide world. I think it's funny is on Facebook comments. A lot of the tourists that go and visit it, their biggest complaint is that it hasn't made a lot of progress in a very short period of time. It's being built for decades. It will not be finished in my lifetime, but it is not being built with any state or federal funding. It is mostly done with local artists and through scholarship-based labor. So all donations that support the building out of Crazy Horse are all individual donations. So please make a donation. I implore you. It's really, really important to me. The idea of Crazy Horse Memorial is to build a bridge between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, which is something I deeply believe in. And if you have an employer match program, please, pretty please do that program because my dogs refuse. So Crazy Horse Memorial, texting messages, you're welcome to keep the conversation going. And it is 202-670-4262. Also follow me on the Instagrams. And if you are watching any of the videos on YouTube, you are also more than welcome to leave nice comments, not ones about putting ice picks in your eyes because this is what my voice sounds like. That's the very first comment I ever got on YouTube, and I have to live with my voice. So thank you. Great. And Kendra, here is the website again. If you are interested in the book club, in theory, you are supposed to fill it out before the webinar ends, which is today. And here are my cutthroat sales things. How about you do it within the next week? Sounds great. Good. People got to talk to people, etc., etc. Let's see. Oh, I got a text. Okay. I need to make a connection with a client who flat out told me they are paying their women less than men. They're not directly my client, and my work with them is basic leadership training, not DEI specifically. So I have to tread carefully, but I want to make a difference. So, first thing I would suggest, which no one will do, but I like to throw it out. And when I work with clients, especially as a consultant, I like this technique. So you are welcome to use this technique. But I just say the absolute best honest truth first. Then they get all squiggly. And so then, okay, well, you're not going to do the first best thing. So then what would the second best thing be? So that they can acknowledge, in this case, they are not interested in lowering the pay of men because they won't raise the pay of women because they say it's a budget issue. Great, save money, lower the rate of men to be equal to women. That's confrontational and also involves my own salary. Okay, great. So then number two would be what? I think most organizations, if not all organizations, should be super transparent of what everybody is getting paid. I used to wait tables. I promised I would never do that again for a lot of reasons, but one of the restaurants that I worked in would print out all of our credit card tips and tape them to the door to the walk-in so we could see the percentage of credit card tips that we were all getting. And it was really competitive. But what was interesting is it doesn't include cash tips because there's no paper trail for that. Thank you, IRS. But the credit card tips was a quantitative thing that was used to justify how good of a server someone was. Of course, this system can be manipulated because you would just have your friends come in and give you a ton of money on a credit card and then give them cash later, or at least that is what some people did, I've heard. Being able to transparently post what everybody is making means that everybody would know what everybody is making. Any organization, at least in the US, that is publicly funded, you can find this information on the internet. So privately funded organizations are really the only ones that don't do this. And I think that that is by design. So don't do it anymore. Just publish it. And if you can't publish it, it's because you know that it's inequitable and you're not willing to have that confrontation or that conflict. Okay, now let's have a conversation there. So as the text person says, if you really are working under a leadership place, it's the confrontation skills around the lack of equity that you think is okay. So can you come up with like the mission, the vision, the values of this organization that justify inequitable treatment? Because that's what you're doing. So you might as well just justify it. What is it for? And they will actually do the work to come up with justifying it. Usually it's sexist in nature, but they'll come up with it. But now you're making them say the words. And when you make them say the words, often they are more likely to make those changes. Or they'll just fire you, especially if you're a woman, and then go hire a man consultant to get over it. When I was in my MBA program, one of the big questions that we got asked in class, and I was the first to raise my hand, of course, because I am Hermione, was what is the best thing that a corporation could do for the environment? So I raised my hand. They called on me, and I said, close. I am not wrong. That is the best thing any corporation could possibly do for the environment is stop functioning. They're not going to do that. So what is the second best thing? And if you know that you're choosing the second best thing, then know that you're choosing the second best thing. If the second best thing isn't possible, what's the third best thing? But at least be conscious of the choice that you're making. I think that's the least we can do about responsibility, right? There's a quote that gets attributed to a million different things because that's how memes work. So I don't know who originally said it, but let's go with a Chinese proverb, an indigenous person, or Gandhi. Somebody said something that was roughly the best time to plant a tree is 2,000 years ago. Second best time is today. Great. So go plant a tree, right? That's kind of the idea. And can we be responsible for choosing the second best thing for whatever reasons and justify why we are choosing the second instead of the first best thing? That's what better means. So with that, I would like to stop sharing and see if there are other thoughts, comments, anything that I can do to help as we wrap up the 12-part series that totally made sense to me somewhere. Here we go. Good morning. We did it. I just realized my sweater is kind of a shout out to the NASCAR, which was unintentional, but we have reached the finish line. Ba, 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 ba. Thank you, Emily and Pat, for your admin support as we have gone through the series. All 12 videos will be perpetually available on the same playlist. There's a wrap-up email coming that has everything I've ever shared or suggested or whatever in all of the 12 webinars, all in one place. So those of you that joined at a different time, I don't like to say joined late. It's not late. It is a different time. You should have all of the information in one place. Will I put the slide about pre-ordering your next book? Sure, Kendra, can't wait. Let me go find another PowerPoint deck. You just send me an email and say, I want a book, basically. Except I can't find it. Nope, that's my email. Why can't I find this? Because I'm under duress. That's why. Great. Open. I closed it. Here we go. Okay. Slideshow. Play from start. Okay. Nope. Don't play from start. I have to find the right slide. What did you want? The pre-ordering of the book. Play from current slide. There we go. And now I'm sharing screen. PowerPoint. This is the directions of how to pre-order my new book. You'll notice that the head heart action model still exists. And if you would like the super nerdy thing that happened in my weird brain was the Cressley triangle. Anyone familiar with 1953 business theory? You know exactly what I'm talking about. I know I'm a nerd. This is why I don't have any friends. I understand. I'm being responsible for myself. Dr. Cressley in 1953 did a lot of interviews with white collar criminals who admitted guilt of committing fraud. And what he discovered is that in order to commit fraud, and this fraud triangle, as it's known, is used in accounting still, because accountants have so much access. And his theory is around opportunity, rationalization, and pressure. And that if those three things are present, even the most loyal, responsible employee is likely to commit fraud because those three things are present. So while I was in said MBA program, while trying not to break sobriety, while definitely not on airplanes during COVID, I learned about this triangle and it just stayed in my mind and I couldn't figure out why it was staying. I would not stop thinking about what the triangle was. And what I have decided is that the triangle isn't just about fraud. The triangle is actually about disruption. And I think you can disrupt for good, and I think you can disrupt for bad. And so after basically thinking of almost nothing at the back left burner, are y'all familiar with the back left burner? No one uses that burner, but that is where all my books get written, is the back left burner. So while thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking about this, I realized that it is more the organizational version of head, heart, and action, because organizations need to be prepared. Rationalization. They need to be able to recognize problems likely that the leadership team specifically doesn't even experience, and to be able to recognize an experience or forms of oppression or something that they likely don't experience, would be able to recognize what those are is really the ideas related to the Hardy part. And then they need to be able to respond, which is very different than reacting. And the gap between reacting and response is where responsibility and agency come in. And that is, as Emily refers to it, the shoe, which I would call action. So the whole new book is currently called What If It Happens? When Answers Need to Ask More Questions, for basically how organizations can be prepared, recognize, and respond to whatever it is they're actually fearing. I use a lot of case studies from my clients. I have changed names for the guilty. But the case studies we can learn from my clients' failures and see how they didn't quite disrupt systems of oppression currently. And so their initiatives failed, but they were in the right direction. I believe failure is actually a really important part of innovation. So how can we learn from my clients' failures? That is the new book. I can't wait. I'm very excited. I submitted a copy to a fancy publisher this weekend and I meet with them on the 21st. Yikes. Other thoughts, comments, questions, anything? Denise says, I'm awesome. Well, thank you very much. Texting number again is 202-670-4262. Super excited to have so many of you. Did we find out, is there a more frequent flyer than missing 2? Did anybody miss less than 2? Well, if you missed 2 or less, you win fictitious unicorn points, which we've talked about. And that is privilege that you cannot spend anywhere else, but it means something in the Bank of Jessica. So thank you very much for being part of the series. If there's anything else I can ever do or be of service in any way, please feel free to reach out. Stay in touch. And I have received many emails about the pre-ordering of the book and the book club. And so I will follow up accordingly once I do the wrap email today. So thank you very much. Have a great day, y'all. Remember to do the best you can with what you got some of the time, because it's better than nothing never.